ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and of course, my they-them royalty. My name is Ashton Gene Lewis. This is the Broke Boy Sports Podcast, and we're about to speed run the fastest show in the history of this show. It literally may be 30 minutes. We'll see. I was off last week mainly because of a huge event that happened in my life. My girlfriend's father got married, so that was pretty dope. It was a lot of fun, but it was also on a Thursday, because Thursday prices are super dope prices for weddings, in case anybody was wondering. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to have to do a summer wedding because my girlfriend is a teacher, and everything that goes along with that. Basically, she's a teacher, a lot of her friends are teachers, and there's no real... there's not like a real negotiation when it comes to like teacher schedules, right? Like they have one period of time where it's like super awesome for them schedule wise to be out there in the world and be free, and it's the summer. So I have a strange feeling that's gonna be my MO. But that's for further down the road, like when this podcast blows up or when I get a much better paying job. We'll see. Anyway, we're here to talk about sports. I'm having a good time. Basically, this show is going to be about Unrivaled and what happened the last couple of weeks in Unrivaled, and it is also going to be about the precursor to NFL free agency, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. So that's pretty much it. Let's dive right into it. Off the top, if you hadn't heard, the Mist ended up winning the... I guess I should do the whole spiel about Unrivaled. Unrivaled is a women's basketball league. It's 3v3, 72-foot court. And it's full court 3v3, very different from FIBA 3x3, which I still don't understand why they don't call it 3v3. I'm assuming somebody else has got that global trademark or whatever. But nonetheless, Unrivaled is a 72-foot 3v3 style league that has playoffs just like the NBA does. And the other thing that happens with it as well is that in the fourth quarter, there is no clock. There is a set score, which is played a huge role in the last couple, really this season more so than ever. The second season in the history of this league was the most competitive season that the league has been in. There was a shuffling of players, which is the cool part about the league. Just in general, there is so how do I put this? It's not 8 teams independently owned by 8 different people. It is 8 teams owned by the league. And so the rosters are selected prior to the season by a collective of coaches to evenly distribute talent. So you don't have teams that are like tanking for draft picks or anything like that. You have teams that are trying to negotiate an even balance of talent overall. It's a league started by Nafisia Collier and Breanna Stewart. Breanna Stewart is the first founder of the league to actually win it when it was all said and done. And of course, there's people online that were kind of upset about what happened in the final, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Mist, a team that has kind of been floating around the third place position vast majority of the season when it comes to Unrivaled. For the most part, it was the Laces up top, and then I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Laces were leading the way pretty much this entire time, and the second piece that I have on my Unrivaled breakdown is just the Laces literally got tripped up in the back half of this season. So there were the final 3 games of the year. I think the Laces entered the playoffs on a 3-game losing streak. In case you're wondering, that's bad in basketball, football, whatever sport you're playing. You go into the playoffs on a 3-game losing streak. It usually means that something's going pretty bad. But the combination of Jackie Young, Alyssa Thomas, who, from what we understand, was injured going into everything that's going on, right? So that was like her biggest qualm. She pulled herself out of the 1v1 tournament that led up to the halfway point of the season. And then subsequently, as the back end of the season kind of popped off, she was able to return to the Laces and finish playing out the regular season, but there was definitely some sort of injury that was nagging with her. She's an older player. She's a person that doesn't have labrums in both of her shoulders. And on top of that, she's been playing for a long time at a really high level. Last year was probably her closest look at being able to be MVP of the league, despite the fact that she owns the most triple doubles in the history of the WNBA when it was all said and done. But Unrivaled, she's one of the deadliest players because she is a stretch 3. So she's a person with the skills of a 3, and then has the ability and strength of a 4, essentially, because of, I think I would say a combination of experience, but she's also been playing basketball for a really long time, and just the way that her body is built. She is dense when she drives to the basket, and you can see it when she plays. But her being injured vast majority of the back half of the season, it was a huge hindrance, and you could tell how much it affected the Laces. Brittany Sykes was a huge lift for the Laces overall. She was actually on the team that won the championship last year, the Rose, and then this upcoming season she was put on the Laces, which is a team that did pretty well last year, and then they showed a lineup with with Brittany Sykes, Jackie Young, and Alyssa Thomas that was really tough to beat in terms of the starters. But the last 3 games of the season, they just couldn't get it done, and it showed itself in an ugly fashion. They fell apart against teams that they had beaten earlier this year in Unrivaled. You only play every team in the league twice, and that composes the entire season. But then going into the playoffs, they got mixed up. And the Vinyl, which is, I say Vinyl with a classic, Vinyl for the second year in a row have dismantled the number 1 team going into the play, pulled off a massive upset for a team that looked like they were going to be real title contenders. Last year was the Lunar Owls when they had Nafisia Collier. This year was the Laces, who spent most of the season, and I say most of the season, I mean like 90% of the season in first place. They were super dominant vast majority of the year, and when you look at their roster, it makes perfect sense. But they fell apart at the end, and Vinyl finally put the nail in the coffin and eliminated them from the playoffs. The Youngins got their wings clipped. If you don't know who the Youngins are, that is the nickname that was given to the Breeze this season. The Breeze led by Paige Beckers, along with I got to give shout out to Ray Burrell for the Vinyl, because I honestly, a player that I gained a ton of respect for, that I already knew was good before when I watched the W. But now I feel like her going into her season next year, she's going to be the player that makes that massive leap that we saw out of Angel Reese which we'll talk about a little bit later, but they're further down the line. But Ray Burrell looks like a player that's primed for another amazing season from her, just based off the fact that she played with a lot more confidence and a lot more assuredness about where to put the ball and how she was going to attack and what she was going to do to get to the hoop. Vast majority of the Unrivaled season, you could see it build as time went on. Their coach is amazing, Teresa Witherspoon. But moving on back to the Youngins. The Youngins are the new team that got added this past season. There were 2 teams that were added. One was called the Hive and one was called the Breeze, and they basically have polar opposite seasons from each other. Hive was the worst team in Unrivaled this year, and they had a bunch of key names on it, like Kelsey Mitchell, who was the best player on the Indiana Fever until further notice. And then they also had Sonia Citron, who was one of the best 3-point shooters in the WNBA this past season. But in Unrivaled, she just kind of fell apart. They had a trade earlier in the season. They lost Sanaya Rivers, so they lost some size and really some ability to drive to the hoop and be able to finish around it consistently. And it tore them apart. The Breeze, on the other hand, the Breeze had the big-time hopefuls. This team was centered around building up some of the youngest talent that's going to be in professional basketball. Paige Beckers, they have Dominique Malonga, they have Cameron Brink, who's a big-time favorite for a lot of people, and really they're big, and Rakia Jackson as well. 4 huge players that everybody's a massive fan of in terms of like online stuff. Obviously, there's like the guys who are just like, oh, they're hot basketball players, and then there's a ton of also like, queer women who are like, they're hot basketball players, but also their games are pretty amazing to watch when it was all said and done. Nonetheless, I was kind of anti-Breeze vast majority of the season because it felt like they were kind of primed to be the team that the league was really, really invested in because of just the amount of presence that they carry off the court. In terms of Dominique Malonga is basically, if you have to do the thing where you make a male equivalent to her, she's Victor Wembanyama for the French women's basketball team. She actually dunked 3 times in the Unrivaled season, which means that she's probably going to do a lot more of it in the WNBA season. But outside of that, Dominique Malonga has amazing touch around the rim and can score at 3 different levels. She was massive. Her conditioning is on point. When she goes back to Seattle Storm, it's very clear that they made the right and most obvious choice as to who was going to cook. But nonetheless, the Youngins get beat by the Mist on the way to the in the quarterfinals on the way to the semifinals, and they had moments where they kind of fell apart. We talked about it last episode where they lost like 5 of their last 8 games prior to the end of the season, and it looked bad in some of those cases. But overall, the Breeze with an excellent start to the season. They qualified for the playoffs. They looked better than some of the more veteran-laden teams, and that team, I think a lot of people want to see the core stick together, and the way Unrivaled works is based off how you finish determines the number of players that you can protect going into the next season. So the Breeze might be in that perfect window of where they can keep all of the superstar young players together, but to sit here and be like Paige Beckers and Dominique Malonga are not the top targets for a lot of teams to get onto their squad, but they'll more than likely be protected. So we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens when it's all said and done. Not a great finish to the season for Rickea Jackson, but it's understandable after the horrifying incident that happened with her ex-boyfriend, who's an NFL, current NFL defensive lineman. Have to wonder what happens later on. If you guys didn't hear, I can summarize it real quick. Rickea Jackson was dating an NFL defensive lineman. He was a rookie. They both went to school together. She lives in LA. He was playing for the Falcons. They broke up. He tracks her down in Miami because every game in Unrivaled outside of the exception games, which this season was Brooklyn and Philadelphia. We'll talk about Brooklyn a little bit later on, but Philadelphia, they just randomly had like one night that they went to Philadelphia and had everybody play, and then they flew back and played in Miami the following day. I don't know how many people made the trip to Philly, but all the teams that played in Philly didn't have to play in Miami the next day, but it was still, I think, pretty important overall. Nonetheless, Rickea Jackson was in the league. Her ex-boyfriend loses his mind. He tracks her down, and he tries to run her car off the road and then runs away from the cops when they come to try and arrest him for dangerous driving, and then also obviously attacking Rickea multiple times throughout the course of this chase that was happening throughout Miami. The other part is that Rickea obviously had some kind of injury on the upper part of her lip from possibly, from the times where her ex-boyfriend rammed his car into hers or anything like that, but who knows. Nonetheless, end of the story, we're really thankful that Rickea got away from that guy, and hopefully the legal system does its thing for the first time ever. I'm kidding. It does the thing all the time, but hopefully the fact that he's rich and has a bunch of money doesn't counteract the fact that he legitimately looked like he was on the verge of committing a far more heinous crime. Anyway, Breeze make it to the playoffs. They lose to a more veteran-laden team in the Mist, which makes a lot of sense. Obviously, we know now that the Mist end up winning the championship, but it's hard for them to stand up to the kind of force that actually the Breeze lost to the Phantom, if I'm not mistaken. Also a veteran-laden team with with Kelsey Plum, but nonetheless, they were amazing throughout the course of this year. They had some ups and some downs, and for the most part, we got to see what Paige Beckers can look like when she's given an opportunity to do her thing in basketball in general, which obviously every year that passes, and I've been watching the WNBA for about 7 years prior to the 2 or 3 years that I watched when I was a kid. That was the thing. I every year that passes, I realize how bad the Dallas Wings are as an organization. We'll talk about something that happened with the Mist in regards to what happened overall, because we can talk about it now. The Mist have a player on their roster who was a huge part of why they were successful this entire season, Veronica Burton. She got cut from the Dallas Wings, and then for the last year, she's just been on a tear in terms of winning stuff. She won her overseas league, which she plays in Australia. Then she was a part of the expansion team to the Valkyries, and when she went to the Valkyries, who play out in Golden State, her first season, Valkyrie's first season in existence ever, Veronica Burton is their first All-Star, and she was literally having a career season, and then she had an injury that prevented her from playing for the rest of the season. She shows up in Unrivaled, she goes deep into the 1v1 tournament, and then wins Unrivaled. All of that in the span of 1 year, plus she won a gold medal for 3x3 for FIBA as well. And now I believe she's on the 5v5 team that's trying to qualify for the FIBA World Cup. It's just been insane. What a massive miss on the part of the Dallas Wings, and it just makes me want Paige Bueckers to be somewhere else so that I can actually root for her. Apparently, there is a Houston team that is in the works coming up pretty soon, and I, for one, it's going to trigger something in me that increases my hate for Dallas as a city. It's a bad place where bad people come from, and that's just how it is. And I can't do anything about it. That's just the history of the city. You let me know. Anyway, that's all I got to say about the Breeze overall. Great season from them. They outperformed my team. My team is the Rose, and man, it was them fighting and scrapping to get all the way to the playoffs, because in the final week of the season, they were trying to fight for seeding, and then the worst possible thing happened. They lost to the worst team in the league, which kind of torpedoed any chance of them being able to catapult themselves into the top 3 in terms of seeding, even surpassing the Breeze in that seeding as well. So it was pretty brutal overall. Things to take away from it: Chelsea Gray is announced as the MVP of Unrivaled. She had multiple 40-point games. She was ridiculous all season long. And I had a friend, and I had to do it, and I feel like I'm the shitty guy when it comes to like my guy friends sometimes. I had a friend of mine who I send basketball reels and memes back and forth to, and today he sent me a reel where somebody was like making fun of Chelsea Gray, and I had to be like, hey man, I cannot emphasize enough how big of a fucking loser this guy is for making this video, because I can't. It shows that, one, he doesn't care about women's basketball, right? Because it was a joke about how he imagines his Jordan shimmy being, because Chelsea Gray had a moment that went viral and Unrivaled where she bounced the ball in front of her, shimmied her shoulders, turned around and missed the jumper. In a game I think she actually scored like 40 points in. But the other aspect of it was like this guy being like, what I think my Jordan shimmy looks like, and it's Kobe Bryant sinking a jumper, and then the other version is like what it actually looks like, and it's Chelsea Gray during her shimmy. And I was just like, man, like what a piece of shit. And you can tell it's one of those moments where it's like, this is just a guy who wants to shit on women, and I hope that other women see him making this distinct effort to shit on somebody who's just playing professional basketball, who's more successful at sports than he will ever be. He's making reels on IG, and she's winning championships. She won Unrivaled. She's a gold medalist. She won the WNBA, and she won Unrivaled prior to this past WNBA season. So it's just been ridiculous for Chelsea Gray. And now she's Unrivaled MVP, despite the fact that the Rose looked fucking terrible the back half of the season. Angel Reese went out there, and every time, and for those of you who don't know, who are just like, why is this guy talking about women's basketball for a long period of time? It's because that's what I do on this show now, apparently. I have to be... I wouldn't even say have to be. I like talking about women's basketball. I watch women's basketball with my girlfriend. It is what has gotten my girlfriend into sports in general, and she enjoys it. I've enjoyed it for a long time, and this is one of the few sports that I've watched with my girlfriend where she has sat down and enjoyed it. And one thing that kept happening, and I hate that this happened so much, because I know there's some piece of shit out there who's still doing the same bitch-made shit that we've seen in years past, where it's like they take clips of Angel Reese missing layups and being like, this is the only thing that she does, in a game where she almost had a triple-double, which happened multiple times last year with her in the Chicago Sky. When she came back because she basically showed up halfway through the season for the Rose, and when she came back, it was like she couldn't miss. Like she scored multiple heavily contested layups. She was able to finish around the rim. Her ball handling is somehow increased, even though she's essentially been on vacation for the last couple of months, and it's tough. It's got to be tough for the guys who spend most of their time trying to find a reason to shit on Angel Reese, because she has gotten significantly better. There's one guy in particular, and I hate to say his name. I've listened to every single episode of his podcast, but he spends a lot of time trying to coddle Angel Reese like she's not a professional basketball player. Angel Reese had a triple-double last year, and there's one guy named Van Lathan Jr. I love Higher Learning. I've listened to every single episode. I listen to the Midnight Boys. I listen to Rewatchables when he's on it, because I like his insight despite some of my disagreements with the way that he purports himself and some of the things that he just says, like some of the things that he believes on the world, which I think is an important part of like choosing who you listen to as a podcast. But he spent a lot of time 2 years ago when everybody was pretending that they were going to all of a sudden start watching WNBA basketball, trying to be like, we got to protect Angel Reese. And it's like, Angel Reese doesn't need protection. She's a grown-ass woman that has been a grown woman for a long time. And everything is centered around her connection with Caitlin Clark, when the fact of the matter is that if you look at history, like just verbatim, every time Angel Reese has played a team that Caitlin Clark is on, Caitlin Clark has lost. That's just how it is. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're about to all be on the 5v5 team, the qualifying team for the FIBA World Cup, which will be a lot of fun. It was just really funny. They posted the roster. They posted the official roster, I want to say a couple days ago, for the FIBA 5v5 World Cup qualification for the women's side, and everybody on the roster played in Unrivaled except one person. CC. So CC's been healing up too, and if her groin injury is healed up, congratulations, Team USA. You got another great player along with a series of other ridiculously great players on Team USA. So that I think I talked about the teams enough. Let's talk about Brooklyn. Brooklyn was the host, basically where the Nets play. It's where the Nets play in Brooklyn. Was the host of the Unrivaled semifinals. This feels like it is yet another litmus test for the draw of Unrivaled if it were to go on the road, right? They had the Philadelphia experience that they spent a year and a half talking about leading up to it, and then they revealed about halfway through the season, I think they did during the 1v1 tournament for the first time, mention that the semifinals were going to be in Brooklyn, so it was kind of short notice in theory of like, hey man, if you want to watch Unrivaled basketball, we're going to be in Brooklyn for the semifinals of the playoffs. Show up and show out. It was sold out. There was a huge line outside the stadium leading into it, which is typically happens with any sporting event, for the most part, especially if it's sold out. The other aspect of it, it was very, like, the crowd was electric in there because the way the other arena works, is it the Sephora Arena? I think it is. The Sephora Arena, the way that arena works is it's supposed to be like a black box theater, closed environment where there's bleachers it's supposed to be the gap between a high school gym and a college arena. And it kind of fits that mold, you can tell, because there's one half of the court that just simply does not have fans behind it, right? Like the side that has the benches has the DJ area and the giant graphic displays. So there's only 3 out of the 4 sides have actual people on it. It's really cool that it's a really cool environment, and it's a great environment to prevent this idea that there won't be people there and all that kind of stuff like that. But for the most part, a lot of people show up every single game, despite who's on the docket to be able to play. The Brooklyn series was obviously a huge success because it was the semifinals leading into the finals, and then the finals happened in Miami, and it was sold out as well. It was sold out also in Miami. So massive success for Unrivaled in terms of in-person attendance. I know that people were talking about how while the football season was going on, just like every other major sport that happens in America, there was a massive dip in the ratings, which happens all the time. Once again, football rules everything. That's why football's been slowly encroaching on stuff that typically belong to the NBA, which is like Martin Luther King Day, and also they've basically reorganized their entire schedule around the NFL's reorganized their entire schedule around the idea of being a 365-day-a-year league, right? That's why free agency, that's why the combine is where it is, that's why free agency is where it is, and everything that leads up to it, because they know that every time one of these major events happens, they can use a short amount of time to build up to it, and then when it happens, it dominates television in terms of ESPN, it dominates NBC, it dominates Fox and everything like that, because you don't have a choice but to talk about football, whether you're involved in it or invested in it or not. That hurt Unrivaled in the first half of this season, but nonetheless, I would like to remind everyone the reason that Unrivaled added 2 teams this past season was because they hit the highest possible contract incentives for the league set down by sponsors and the league founders, and because of how successful they were the first year, they were able to add 2 teams onto the roster. One of those 2 teams actually made it to the playoffs and looked really good. The other one looked terrible, but I think that problem will fix itself because I think it's 3 of the players that they pre-signed, because Unrivaled does this cool thing where they sign players that are in college to be basically preordained to be Unrivaled players, and one of those is AZ Flood, and she's going to be a huge boost for the talent pool that shows up later on this season, or later on after whatever happens with the WNBA. Outside of that, Brooklyn was fucking amazing. The sketchiest thing I think a lot of people were talking about, and I can even admit to it myself, the officiating was a little hairy at some times, and I think that's okay for us all to be honest about it, for us all to admit that the officiating was a little off in some of the semifinal games, and then a little bit of it leaked into the championship as well. One of the huge plays and one of the big issues, and everybody was tweeting about it who was watching Unrivaled, the biggest issue is the championship game ended with what looked to be a charge call initially was reviewed and then overturned as a charge call when it was Tiffany Hayes rotating outside of the restricted area circle to try and take contact from Breonna Stewart. The problem is that she put her arms up and crossed them in front of her chest. She had left her arms by her side. I think without a shadow of a doubt, they called it a charge. It felt like she was in good defensive positioning and she had stopped moving. And from what I understand, also, we have moved past, rules-wise, we have moved past the era where people have to be completely still to be able to draw a charge, because how can you play defense, go completely still while an offensive player is driving in and take contact? Anyway, the Tiffany Hayes situation was tough. Tiffany was obviously pissed after they overturned the call because it felt like Phantom was coming back in the championship game versus Mist. And then it ends with Breonna Stewart, who is the founder of the league, on the line to shoot for a free throw. The free throw goes in. Free throws are worth 2 or 3 points in Unrivaled instead of having to make 2 free throws. They take the free throw, make the free throw. Breonna Stewart wins. All the confetti falls down and Mist pulls off an amazing finish to the season. Once again, it feels like for like the second or third, or it feels like for the back-to-back seasons, the team that is in like the top 3 does not finish, or the teams that are in the top 3 are somewhat title contenders. When it was all said and done, it came down to a team that spent a lot of time in 4th place and it was able to elevate themselves at the back half of the season. It's about how you finish going into the playoffs, not necessarily how much you sit there at the top all the way through. We saw that with the Laces. Phantom was a team that arrived late to the top half of the bracket as well. When they were able to finish, they were a team that if you stopped the league before the final week of the season, they were outside of the automatic buys into the semifinals. And I think the Mist were as well. The Mist spent most of their season in 3rd place. And for it to come down to 2 teams that you saw kind of build a ton of momentum, because the Mist were a bad team last year, and the addition of Alicia Gray and then having Arike Agumbawale come off of the bench, making her the deadliest bench player in Unrivaled was huge. Because Arike actually ended up hitting the game-winning shot versus the Breeze to go into the Unrivaled finals. Amazing highlight moment that I think a lot of people saw. If not, I put it on my Instagram story. Follow me on Instagram at @TheAshtonForever. I had a ton of fun watching the entirety of this Unrivaled season, and the cool stuff coming out of it. The Mist were a really good team from top to bottom. Kelsey Plum, 40 points in the finals to set the record for most points scored in Unrivaled final. Absolutely insane, because there's only been, I think, like less than 10 40-point games in the history of Unrivaled, and 3 of them belong to like Chelsea Gray or something like that, and 1 of them belongs to Kelsey Plum in the final. The other aspect of it is Alana Smith, who is a bench player for the Mist, is actually in a pretty tough spot after she wins the championship. She celebrates and she drinks and stuff like that, but she admits in media that, hey, she actually has to catch a flight tonight. I think it was like the night of the championship or like the next day of the championship. She had to catch a flight to Australia so that she can compete for Team Turkey to be able to go to the FIBA World Cup, which is the exact same qualifier the rest of Team USA is playing in, but her games were a little bit earlier. So it was pretty wild overall. Nonetheless, the Mist stern reminder about Unrivaled. Basically, Mist was like, what if we had the best power forwards in the league? And that led them to being successful. A lot of the true centers or true point guards were the ones that really struggled very much in Unrivaled overall. And I think that's a great sign of like the quality of the league when the players who can shift between the most positions in terms of the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in basketball, the players who shift between the most of those positions are the deadliest players. For instance, Breonna Stewart is essentially a 3, 4, or a 5, depending on the situation, right? And the same thing can go for Arike Ngubawale. She's a 1 or a 2 in a lot of situations. Alicia Gray can be a 1 through 3 when the situation calls for it. When she plays for the Atlanta Dream, she's a 1. But on top of that, she's also one of the deadliest scorers on the court at any given moment. And that's what I felt like helped get Mist over the hump. They had a lot of players who had a great amount of versatility, and that's what really separated them when it was all said and done. Shout out to them. I think that's all I got to say. Also, Unrivaled has to be in contention for like the dopest trophy in sports. It is it's a chess piece with 3 different crowns on it because it's a 3v3 league. I, for one, think it is one of the dopest trophies. The 1v1 trophy is fucking amazing. It's a queen with a removable crown, and so when you win it, you actually take the crown off the queen piece and put it on your head. I think that's pretty fucking dope overall as well. But the winners of the league, they split $600,000 between the 3 players, plus the players were getting paid throughout the course of the league. I think it's like $250,000 for each player or something like that. So plus the free throw competitions for $50,000 each, I think, or something like that. There was a first half and a second half free throw competition in terms of like who had the best free throw percentage after meeting like a certain requirement, plus the 1v1 tournament, which is pretty dope because we talked about how Chelsea Gray won it. It was for $200,000, and Chelsea Gray's salary with the Aces is $250,000. So she doubled the money. It's gonna be a good Christmas in the Gray house, and that's important. She's got a son. He's pretty cute. Everything else, I think that's all I got for Unrivaled. There has to be a massive retooling for Mist. Like, there has to be a massive change in terms of like how Mist operates as an organization. There has to be a massive retooling of Hive. Probably going to have to build the team from ground up. Also, the approach of like focusing on Sonia Citron. I feel like I've been saying it all season. And maybe it's changed a little bit as it's gone on, but there has to be a drastic change in terms of like how they play as a team and also in terms of the roster, because it didn't feel like they had too many game changers outside of Sonia and Kelsey Mitchell. So even when Sanaya Rivers was on the team, it didn't feel like she touched the ball enough for a player who's as dynamic as she is. Anyway, moving on, let's talk about NFL football, baby. Take a sip here. We're going to have to power through this, guys, because I get kicked out of here at like a certain point. I'm already past my time that I said. Moving on. Let's talk about the NFL pre-chess game. Right now, NFL free agency is in 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, and teams are making moves. If you guys don't know, free agency is when players who have expired contracts are eligible to sign with any team that they want to. That includes rookies who didn't get their options picked up. If you don't know, if you're a first-round pick, you get like a 5-year contract or 4-year contract off the jump. And if you play well enough, typically your team is going to pick up that 5th-year option. Even if you're actually like kind of on the verge of possibly being a good player, they usually pick up that 5th-year option because it's really hard to find high-quality football players. For people who are fans of the Oakland Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, in the chat, you know what's up. Anyway, if you're watching right now, make sure you like and subscribe as well. I appreciate that. Anybody who checks out the show at any given point. But nonetheless, let's talk about the NFL overall. Huge movement from my Houston Texans. The Texans traded away Tytus Howard, who is our starting left tackle this past year. After we traded away wow, man, why is his name escaping me? Wow. This is what happens when I try and like work on my freeform skills, because the Texans are obviously a team that I follow. I think I've watched every single Texans game since 2002, and man. Anyway, we traded away our left tackle. Tytus Howard moved over. He originally was the right tackle. He actually was hurt in the playoff game versus the New England Patriots. and was a massive reason of probably why that game went off the rails almost instantaneously. But we'll talk about that another day. He gets traded to the Browns, a team that had one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL this past season, and he gets traded away for a 5th-round pick. So yet another move by Nick Caserio that involves getting draft capital. So much of what Nick has done the last, really 4 years prior to CJ Stroud showing up has been trying to get as many draft picks as he possibly can for a reasonable amount of players. Obviously, this move is concerning based off the fact that just as bad as the Browns' offensive line was, the Texans may have been in real contention to be right next to him for a vast majority of the season. And I think, and this is what happens, and I hate saying this because this is like real fandom type shit. I have faith in Nick Caserio to come up with a plan here. Obviously, the plan is going to be draft a shit ton of offensive linemen in this draft, considering how pretty good you feel about every other position for the Houston Texans, especially considering what happens next. So after Tytus, this was before? This trade happened before. The Lions trade David Montgomery to the Houston Texans. That they trade away Juice Scruggs, who was a former draft pick, and they get 2 picks out of it. David Montgomery was one of the big targets. It felt like a lot of people, people have speculated the compensation is kind of as rich as it is because there was another contender. Some people I think were saying like the Rams or something like that. Some of the podcasts I was listening to. But for the most part, what we really got here is David Montgomery, extremely talented running back who felt like he was kind of underappreciated. I talked about it throughout the course of the season. That was my biggest qualm with how the Lions were splitting carries. I absolutely hated it. Vast majority of the season, you can go back and check out the other episodes. I hated how David Montgomery had his carry splits with Jahmyr Gibbs, and I feel like it was a big reason why they struggled as an offense up front because they have another layer to their run game that they were cutting themselves off from, while Jared Goff was really struggling to kind of find the rhythm as a pass offense. But now they're in a do or die situation. They've had 2 offensive line, really basically since Dan Campbell took over as the head coach of the team, and they built up the offensive line to be one of the best in the league in terms of like run blocking and stuff like that. There's just been a slow degradation of that. Dan Skipper, who's the extra offensive lineman that some of us remember, he's basically the designated touchdown guy when they're running like weird trick plays, but he's also a designated extra offensive lineman to help with the run blocking game. He's out. They've got a series of other players. Like, remember, they had the offensive lineman he had like a grade 3 tear of his hamstring after he retired and then came back and all that kind of stuff like that. Anyway, the Lions are in an interesting situation because it feels like, maybe I'm crazy, they're going back to their old ways. We'll see. But David Montgomery to the Texans, massive. Joe Mixon, if you're a Texans fan, you've been kind of been like, he's out of the mix for a long time. The team has basically told you that since the beginning of last season, and you got to believe him. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason he hasn't been in practice for whatever. There's speculation on what happened. People are talking about like he shot himself and he refused to get the proper treatment, all that kind of bullshit like that. He's doing his own thing, and I feel like that's kind of what Joe Mixon's issue has been. He's always doing his own thing. But he was really good those 2 years that we had him on the team, and everything else since then has been not super great. Anyway, David Montgomery is going to be huge just because the running back position is not as good as it was a couple of years ago, and that ability for the running backs to go out there really help the offense get that second layer to it. Takes a lot of pressure off CJ Stroud when it comes to passing. David Montgomery also allegedly is a good pass blocking running back. Well, pass blocking running back positioning is real hyper dependent upon the system that you're in and all that kind of stuff like that. But I mean, it's a good move. They give up 2 draft picks and they give up Juice Scruggs, and it really feels like the offensive line is getting torn down to the studs essentially, and it's going to be completely redone. But I don't know if you can completely flip your offensive line in the course of one season, but aggressive moves are necessary because this is the last season before CJ Stroud is eligible for his super big extension that is going to more than likely put the Texans in a situation where a lot of other players are not going to get paid. For instance, Danielle Hunter got announced a couple of hours ago, has signed a 1-year, $40 million fully guaranteed contract, which is super dope for him. Danielle has been a massive, massive part of why the Texans have been successful, and the Texans put him in the position where he's like, hey, man, we'll pay you a bunch of money for this 1 year, but we got to get ready for what happens after this. And what happens after this is the tsunami of paying a young quarterback, and hopefully he reinstills a lot of faith in the fan base this upcoming season, so they feel a little bit better about giving him all that money, because there's not a chance in hell that they're going to let him walk. So, outside of that, the Chiefs trade away Trent McDuffie, who was their number one cornerback for the last 3 or 4 years, right? Other than Charlton Davis. Anyway, Trent McDuffie, number one corner, to the Rams, which is really funny because some of the few offseason notes, because I try not to filter a lot of what I think through the things that GMs say when they're at like stuff like the combine, or when they're at stuff like the exit interviews and stuff like that. But I remember distinctly reading about how the Rams GM was talking about how they specifically are going to have a ton of questions at the cornerback position. They have a couple of guys that they drafted. They have Emmanuel Forbes, a dude that was a former first-round pick for the Commanders, that they have a lot of questions about, and it looks like Emmanuel Forbes may need a new job soon. They got a lot of people who are looking for extensions, and a lot of dudes who have guaranteed money that is completely expired off their contracts as well. And this looks like a move to find a new phase of the Rams secondary, considering how well they started off the season and then how the defense kind of fizzled out as the season went along. But nonetheless, it's hard to sit here and say they fizzled out because they lost to a team that knows them the best, right? And the team that had a better defense than them overall in the Seattle Seahawks. But that is the case. That is the cruelty of the NFL. It doesn't matter who they put in front of you. You got to be in a position to be able to beat them. The Bears traded away DJ Moore, who is a guy that, meme-wise, we've all been talking about how it seems like Caleb Williams may or may not like DJ Moore and all this kind of stuff like that. But now he's going to be – DJ Moore is taking on the cursed position, the most cursed position in all of football. He's going to be the number one wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. So come on down. And if you don't do well, they will hate your absolute fucking guts because they truly believe that they have a championship-level team despite all the evidence that is laid out in front of them. Anyway, good luck to DJ Moore. He's going to need it. The Bills in another situation where they trade away draft picks, obviously trying to maximize this time that they have with Josh Allen as their QB. So we'll see what happens. And the Bears in a pretty good situation because they drafted Luther Burden, and towards the back end of the season, he showed a lot of promise. And more importantly, Rome Odunze, a guy they drafted 2 years ago, has shown himself that he can go out there and cook it up a little bit. So crazy shit. Cam Jordan, 15 years in the NFL, all with the New Orleans Saints, and finally, as it looks like the Saints are about to turn the corner, Cam Jordan has chosen for the first time in his career to hit free agency. So is he the new Von Miller? He might be the new Von Miller. But I think Cam Jordan still got some juice left in him. And he also defends the run a little bit better than Von. Von did get a Super Bowl championship out of his ring chasing. So that does pan out for him. Anyway, wish the best for Cam Jordan. He's a real eccentric kind of guy. He had a lot of fun in New Orleans. And I can just tell you right now, it's got to be tough. It's got to be tough to be a player for the Saints based off of how much Louisiana loves the Saints so much, plus how fucking dope your life has got to be living in New Orleans. You look at every other team in the NFL, and it's really hard to find a spot that's better than New Orleans. Outside of like Houston, Miami, Houston, Miami, where else? LA, and I guess New York if you're that kind of guy, but you want to talk about things that play. If you're a person that loves New Orleans, Miami and Houston are like your top two spots that you definitely want to go to, and obviously Atlanta as well. So maybe that'll be a sign. Cam Jordan taking the space of Pierce, since they look like they are going to be short of defensive linemen this upcoming season. Rumors are swirling about one of the best linebackers in the NFL. By the way, Tremaine Edmonds cut allegedly is going to be cut from. Oh no, he has been released. He's been officially released. So the combination of trading DJ Moore, releasing Tremaine Edmonds, who's the number one linebacker for the Bears. He had a bunch of key plays throughout the course of the season on a defense that really struggled in terms of just playing straight up defense. He generated a ton of turnovers. And then Drew Allman, who is their starting center this past year, who's retiring. They have freed up $44 million in cap space. That's a huge pathway to make huge moves. And you got to wonder, are they going to use it all? Obviously, there's a lot on the line based off what we saw from Caleb Williams, with his trajectory clearly going all the way up after a really rough rookie season. So outside of that, crazy stuff. Zaire Franklin, who, for my money, outside of the fact that he says that he hates musicals, which puts you in the bad book by my estimation, by my standard, you suck if you think that musicals suck. I'm not a big fan of that. I love musicals. Zaire Franklin, not a fan of musicals, but is a fan of making a shit ton of tackles. One of the best linebackers in the NFL. Apparently is up for trade because the Colts are right up against that salary cap. Gotta wonder how long we're gonna let Ballard run the Colts, right? They're up against the salary cap. They were one of the best teams in the NFL until Daniel Jones got hurt. Have to wonder, because now we know what the situation is, right? Like, Daniel Jones has been given the transition tag, so he's getting an average of the top 10 positions, average of the top 10 instead of the top 5, which is the franchise tag. And then Anthony Richardson is gone. They believe Riley Leonard is a guy that can fill the role if Daniel Jones cannot start the season or if he goes down again throughout the course of the season. So, you know, we will see. I, for one, the slow deterioration of the Colts defense has been something I've been paying attention to for a while, because one of the reasons they were so excited about Anthony Richardson showing up is because they clearly had a Super Bowl caliber defense. And as time has gone on, that has been slowly whittled down by a multitude of things, one of it being retirements and then injuries as well. Like, you talk about, like, they had their number one cornerback last year essentially retire midway through the season. He played one game and then retired because he said it's over for him. So that was an interesting journey. But the Colts defense is moving on into a next phase. If Zaire Franklin ends up getting traded, the Colts are going to be moving on into a new era of their defense. He is a huge part of why they've been so successful the last 4 years. He is a massive, massive piece of their defense, despite the fact that we live in a time now where people don't care about linebackers until they do. If you are a person that sits there and you wonder why your team gives up so many check down plays for like 10, 15 yards, it is because the linebackers are not good enough. Zaire Franklin don't play that mess. He plays the run and he plays them check downs. He plays the flat and he plays hitting the quarterback. That is his MO. He plays for a team that I don't like all that much, but I can't deny, homie can ball. So that's all I got, man. Everything else going on in NFL free agency we'll talk about when we come back. When I come back next week, I'm scrolling through here. I am watching the NBA. I do not feel confident enough to talk about it on this podcast. So, because I'm not watching the entirety of the league, I do know that I have been watching way more NBA basketball this year than I have in the last couple of years. So, yeah, that's it. Oh, wow. So, here we go. Angel, I just saw this on StatMuse, and we can start playing the music out because I'm done. StatMuse, one of the best follows on Twitter. If you're a person that's still on Twitter, I'm assuming they're on Blue Sky as well, which I've been telling myself I need to get on, but I have 3,000 followers on Twitter, and I know that means not much to a lot of people, but it means a lot to me. Angel Reese is the youngest WNBA player to ever record 18 points and 10 offensive rebounds in a game last season. Her brother, Julian Reese, is the youngest NBA player to record 18 points and 10 offensive rebounds in a game this season. Apparently, rebounding is genetic. Who would have thought? All right, I'm out. Make sure you tell everybody that you care about, that you love them. Forgive your enemies. Hate the haters. Drink some water. And most importantly, go home, Roger.